right, welcome. In this last little video, I wanted to go through one more composition and talk about the ways, again, that we can use and appreciate foundations, fundamentals to push the larger conceptual intentions or what it is that you want to say with your work. So in this, I'm going to look at a Titian painting, slightly older than the ones that we've looked at prior, just to give you that completely relative hopscotch through history. And this one's from about 54. It's Venus and Adonis. And so what I wanted to do is go through that same basic kind of workflow or thinking process. And in this, really go a little bit further to instill how what we've been talking about as the foundations or fundamentals, which again are largely abstract, are what is driving an understanding of psychological quality. So, people always bring their compositions or their work to me and then expect a big reading based on details or the way people are looking or, the gaze of one person interacting with another as if that's composition. And I'm trying to advocate instead for the way that fundamentals or the abstract, straight, C, S, shapes, color, value, abstract elements are really what's behind our understanding and emotional or psychological investment in a picture. So again here, so this is Titian, Venus and Adonis. Venus, the goddess of love, Adonis, the goddess of, god of desire. So we have these two characters. They're in a semi-embrace. So the basic story here, right? So this is the benefit of using something that's mythological or perhaps even a religious painting, is that we have an early understanding of what the narrative might be. And so it's an easier way to kind of find our way into what the intention is. And let's go a step further and say, what I want to look for this is I want to try to understand what the story is. But more than that, I want to have an understanding of how, as an artist, that story is presented to me without detail, without all the finish. What is the skeletal structure of that experience? And so the way I would phrase that is, how does the abstract, so this is again to refer to our fundamentals, how do abstract qualities, line, shape, value, color, produce or equal some kind of psychological? Or you could go, if that's a bizarre phrasing, you could say, what is the emotional, how are we invested? What is the story from those abstract qualities? So we have in prior videos discussed that there are components of a composition that you can think of if it's helpful, such as there being unity and variety as the two major poles of what are included, and that these interact in ways that you could think of simply to begin with as creating support or creating contrast. And if I'm to look at this, I'm going to do that little thumbnail sketch over here. So this is my little composition, let's say. What do I think is unifying this? So what gives this unity, the picture? And if I look at everything again, remember, one way to help find unity is, where does your eye go? So where's the important part of the picture? Sometimes that's the unifying area is the focal point. I would say it's definitely here provided by arrangement, let's say proportion of detail or mass, and then contrast of value. So I would say Venus's body against that dark background. And if I look in that area, what I think I find is another golden mean. Thanks for watching. If you've been enjoying these videos, whether it's a construction, anatomy, foundation, drawing, I'm going to be releasing a course for pre-sale on my website that's titled From Mannequin to Character. And this course is one that I've been working on for a little bit, but it goes through some different ways or strategies of drawing the figure that can give you a suggestive mannequin or build without having to invest a lot of time and energy into all the anatomy. And it's come as a suggestion from students to get anatomy without all of the rigorous training and learning of muscles and insertions and origins. But it's also kind of a fun class because it allows for us to access some ideas about archetype, cultural stereotype in it. I look at some famous illustrators and break down their body types. And I think it'll be a unique course, especially because for any pre-sale, I'm going to be also doing some live additions to the course. So I'll be adding 3 2 to 3 hour live sessions to try to take questions, look at some student work in terms of critique. All of that will be recorded and then bundled back into the course. So this is a course I'm doing at the request of students to kind of add something that seems to be of a common and consistent concern amongst them. So yeah, if you're interested, if it sounds appealing, check out the link in the bio, or you can head over to my website, figuredrawing.info, and check it out. Thanks. And so what is the golden mean? As an abstract division of space in the page, our dirty golden mean, right, means that is harmony. That's the most harmonious part of the picture. So that's comfort, that's home, that's where we enjoy looking. And then what is in this, what would be variety? What adds elements of support or contrast to that? And so very simply, I would say what creates contrast, or what gives variety and provides, I'm saying there's contrast more so than support in this picture for the read of the golden mean, is that Adonis's body, which is kind of grotesquely disproportioned in this picture, represents this diagonal, or is a diagonal that is tethered to the golden mean, but does everything in its power to kind of pull us off of it. And I would say the resulting emotional or psychological takeaway from that is tension. And so what is the tension? Well, the tension here is Venus is providing or represents this position of love, warmth, desire, right? The embrace. And Adonis is compelled instead to leave for the hunt. So we have the role of the hunt, or the activity of the hunt, as kind of superseding or winning out over this kind of like this erotic fixation, or this home base, which would be Venus in the picture. So you could see that as one winning out or the other, or maybe I think there's maybe a more important is there's a quality of tension. These two things are in tension. We don't know, like Adonis isn't off screen. He hasn't left forever. But this is the picture to me. This is how this picture is successful or not. And then if this is the way that this is maintained throughout the picture, or, you know, the littler elements around the picture that might help embellish this relationship of golden mean to diagonal, is the composition. So this is where I think planning exists for a picture. If I'm working on rendering the butt cheek or the eyeball or the arm, I've really lost before I've even started. So let's explore some of those larger on top, those building blocks on top. So if I start to kind of sketch this in here, let's say this, so here's my picture again. Again, my intention is not to create a finish. I really want to think about how fundamentals, line, shape, value, and color come back to and redevelop or elaborate or give texture and interest to my schema, my compositional map of what's taking place. I think this is the hardest part. The hardest part to figure out in a picture is what we've already done. The rest is just kind of icing in development. So I'm always advocating for people to stay there. But now would be the time if you wanted to do a little bit more in terms of, let's see how all little parts support. So I'm going to give a little sketch here. Let's say I'm going to find, just working from the top down, some shapes for the trees. But my basic understanding of this area as a whole is that it creates, continuity with the golden mean. And then it's where Venus is anchored. So if I look at, let's do a little sketch for Venus. So this could be your, whatever way you want to begin to understand gesture. So here's a head. I really don't care about creating her likeness or her proportion. What I'm interested in is how the form, perspective, or volume of the figure participates in with the composition. And this is why I prefer kind of these abstract volumetric breakdowns of figures. It's the best way for me to use or incorporate the figure as a vehicle into understanding the larger arrangements of pictures and their structure, and right, how does the figure at that abstract level maybe dissolve into the picture. So let's get a little bit more here. You've seen me do this a number of times where I just kind of, based on my initial layout and proportioning, kind of grow the picture a little bit. So leg going this way and it kind of coming back. I think she probably has the most interesting and elaborate posing. So there's a really interesting twist here that I might want to come back to and think about more later. But my first impression of it, if I'm just thinking about the perspective of her body and why is there a twist? Well, part of her body is forcing us to stay in this comfortable area, right? The lower body, pelvis, leg, everything is pushing us in space back toward the golden mean, the division of the golden mean, which we're psychologically referring to as a home or something, an area that our eye wants to be, right? So that's facing this way. And then gradually her body turns to meet her lover, which is moving away or out of home. So she's a great kind of bridge figure in between the area of the golden mean and then the prompt or the tension of Adonis, and that diagonal compelling our eye to move away. Before we get too much farther, let's say there's some kind of crate that she's sitting on, which I don't really care to give too much detail to, drapery. I do have an interest in this little pot because that mimics her space. Look at the way that creates another visual wraparound. So you could even think about, look at where the crate is here at the bottom, or this little box. And notice how that crate is really at the intersection area of that golden mean. And what I'm starting to see is that a lot of the space for the limbs and the pot, right? And then look at the way that this leg goes back and in. This is surrounding our attention in a three-dimensional way, spatially, around this crate or around her seat. So what is that? What is the use of space and shape doing here? It's making your eye want to be back here. It's investing more attention in your eye belonging there. So again, to go back to the theme of the videos, why are fundamentals important? Should we just practice them in isolation and perfect cylinders? No, it's horribly boring. But the impact that it can have on the arrangement of a thought, right, in terms of composition, is incredibly fascinating and might make you want to study them more if you start looking at them in a slightly different context. Let's do a little bit with the information in this block up here too. So if I look at the tree, what does the tree do? It gives a nice softening, I would say, to the corner. Remember, we have discussed in prior videos how the corner is a trap. Look at how the arrow or the quiver, is that what it's called? Quiver for arrows. Up here kind of leans your eye away. There's a nice little ribbon that brings your eye out of that top corner. There's another little branch or smaller tree here. And all of that has a way of repeating theme. So it's animation, right? This to this to this. It pulls your eye in and down. So that's curve and line used to repeat. Anytime we repeat something 2 or more times, it starts to provoke visual movement. So this pulls our eye down and in. And then what do we discover? The reclining and slumbering figure of Cupid. So let's put a little gesture in there for this guy. So Cupid's here asleep at the wheel. He's hanging out in the forest, like a little creep. Watching Venus and Adonis. So that's back there. He has some light shadow. So lightest, darkest is Venus against the background. Lightest, darkest, although slightly smaller in proportion, is Cupid against that dark background. So we get that compelling view of contrast in terms of value to keep us there again. So we're developing home, right? All I'm doing is just kind of thinking about this area right now. That sets up my area of golden mean or home base, as I've been saying. And now let's look at the diagonal. So the diagonal is this. This is Adonis kind of moving away. That's the general gesture of the body. And the other thing that I noticed that's really fascinating that I mentioned earlier is he's giant. If this is even though his head is kind of tiny and baby-like that's a very cherub-esque head. It's very tiny. So, but look at the mass of the shoulder, right? The width of the body. So what I feel like that is a proportional distortion to help push the momentum of his movement away. But it makes it feel more, I don't know, not profound, but I would say a little bit more poignant. And then we have, right, so we can think about the space on this, but I think it's more the shape that matters here. And then there are elements that start to move toward, right? So here's the arm. He's kind of making her smell his armpit here. But then we have the, part of his figure in contact with that golden knee area that I've been discussing. So that does bring his eye back in, or our eye back into that. That's one root of incorporation. And then his pelvis is kind of fixed on her, on that little strategic compositional area, right? With the leg coming out this way. So that's another little area of space that's pulling away to the shoe and the foot. And then here's the belt. And then the other leg is still locked back in her area. So you can kind of see a little bit of the knee or thigh moving that way. So that's the tension, right? So we've developed one, the home base, what's giving unity. Variety is pulling us away from that. So we have home and then the desire to leave. And then if we explore more his space of the composition, let's say, what do we have as we move out from him? Well, let's first kind of go and explore this area. So up here I have a kind of a pretty elaborate cloud and sky. There's a focal point up here with a little light shadow. So something breaking through the clouds. Kind of hard for me to make out if that's a figure or not. But that seems like the pole, right? So this would be the freedom, or that would be the kind of the allure of the hunt or the open air, what he's escaping to. And then if I move slightly down from that, right? So again, I'm going through, and if you're at all interested in this, read Andrew Loomis on his discussion of compositions for the way he talks about pathways, how everything in the picture is kind of a pathway, or can be a pathway that prompts you and moves you into different areas. But the clouds really kind of bring us back down and in to this grove, or this area of trees. And the trees as a whole are kind of this diagonal mass or shape that starts to lean us back down and in. All right, so it kind of goes this way. And I'm not going to break up their mass, right? So that I don't need to draw every single tree to understand this. Now let's look at the landscape. The landscape pulls us back down and in to about the area of the hip or the pelvis. But another thing that's giving us tension, right, is the landscape is kind of pulling us back and down into this crux, this area of interaction between home and the desire to leave. We have a little arm on him that sits pronated. It looks like he's grabbing the leash for his dogs. And then she has, one kind of like tenuous hold. It feels like she's, oops, it's a little high. But it does feel like she's fully extended in the arm to try to one last grab. And then she's holding on to like a rope or something that's around his shoulder. So that's another quality of encircling, right? So remember we talked about the way that the space here is moving around the seat. So she's kind of doing the same thing with her embrace. It's going around him. So everything is moving around that diagonal to try to pull it back. So what's going on with these weird dogs down here? So I would say the backs and the heads of each of the dogs mimic and repeat the design of the landscape. So each of these heads is mimicking some or repeating some kind of form in the landscape shape. But as a whole, they also kind of repeat amongst themselves. So let's say this is my dog head. So there's one back here. This is the one in the background. It's gonna do little shapes for them. And then they're all kind of gesturing towards the hunt. So these guys are excited, right, for him to leave. They don't like being at home. They want to go out, they want to party, they want to hunt some stuff. So we have these two, which are especially kind of pulling towards the open sky, the landscape. But look at how each one repeats. So this to this, I have this darker value down here in the corner, so that softens this as a trap. And then notice how this last dog is on the fence. So he's not yet as excited as the others. So let's just draw him as a cylinder. So take out the fact that it's a dog. What does this perspective, this mass do? So this is an echo for what is happening with the seated area. So this dog has more of a hesitancy. And think about it this way. Is it even a dog at all? No, it's not. It's not a dog, it's a painting. So it's mud and pigment rubbed around on cotton, right, or linen. So instead, it's a visual cue about how to understand some type of experience. Every composition, every picture is an experience. And that experience is told to us through the way that fundamentals are arranged at their most abstract level. So this is a perspective macaroni shape that's turning in and pulling the eye back to this area of home. All right, so we have this animation of dogs, part of them, or animation of shapes. Part of them echo to and embrace the design of the landscape, while one out of the three pulls and turns us at this bottom back into the arrangement of the golden mean. And I would say that if you think of this space, really the dog as that depiction of space, that it leads us again back into this urn that's overturned and then back into the leg. And so we're constantly in between the two. In this sense, the pathways in the entire image make us deliberate on the tension that exists between the pull to stay home and then the desire to leave and have adventure.